When taking 360 photos for real estate, usually you don't want to be seen in the photo. In this case, I was 3 feet away from the camera, but you can't see me. I'm going to show you how to do that, and I'm also going to talk about 360 cameras for real estate, as well as some software that are useful for real estate. You're watching 360 Rumors. My name is Mick, and in this video we're going to talk about 360 cameras for real estate. This is going to be a very detailed video, so I'm going to have a table of contents in the description where you can jump around to the different sections depending on which part interests you most. This video is divided into 4 parts. In the first part, I'm going to talk about why you might be interested in 360 cameras for real estate. In the second part, I'm going to talk about some 360 cameras for real estate, just an overview of the different types and why you might want to use each one. In the third part, we're going to talk about software that you might be interested in or you might find useful for 360 for real estate. And in the fourth part, I'm going to show you how to do the shot that I did earlier where I was, just a few feet away from the 360 camera, but I somehow disappeared. So let's get started. So first, let's talk about the opportunity for 360 cameras for real estate. Now, there's a lot of excitement right now about 360 videos. When camera manufacturers release a camera, they focus heavily on the video aspect, the video resolution, the frame rate, all that stuff. And that's great. But the thing about 360 video is that people are still figuring out how to use it. For example, filmmakers are still struggling to create techniques for storytelling, to guide the viewer, even though they have the freedom to look around. Meanwhile, for 360 photos, there's no controversy. They're actually already part of everyone's lives. Without thinking about it, people are actually already relying on them. They use them for street view, for virtual tours when they were booking a hotel, or they're going to some destination they want to see first, or they're trying to see a car they're interested in buying. They all expect to see a 360 photo now. And just as an anecdote, speaking of street view, I uploaded maybe like 14 photos, and in the past year and a half or so, they've already gotten like 2 million views just from 14 photos. So that's how much interest there is in 360 photos. So that's why, even though there's a lot of excitement about 360 videos, that's the sexy thing, there's a cool thing. The one that will actually, I think, has like a more solid future is 360 photos, and I think it's going to be easier to find work, especially for real estate. Like follow the money. There's so much money moving around in real estate, and 360 photos can help sell properties. So there is a need for 360 photos for real estate. Now let's talk about 360 cameras for real estate. I'm going to give you just an overview. So if you want like a more detailed breakdown, I actually did a collaboration video with my buddy Ben Claremont of Life in 360. You can check out his channel where we talk about different 360 cameras for photography. But right now I just want to focus on the ones for real estate. So I'm going to talk about them roughly in order of cost. Let's start. So first, let's say you have a limited budget and you're just starting out and you want to be able to take 360 photos. What can you do? There are hemispherical 360 cameras out there that are really cheap from China. I don't recommend that. Instead, I would recommend this. This is called the theVRKit. And this is an accessory for smartphones. So this has 2 components. There's a lens adapter and the rotator, and you clamp this onto your phone, and you put it on the rotator, and it takes turns, takes a shot, turns, takes a shot. And the benefit of using this is you can take shots of up to 32 megapixels, fully spherical, with just a very small blind spot. When you take photos with the theVRKit, the app will automatically stitch the photo for you. There's nothing that you need to worry about with stitching, so it's really easy to use. And I guess the drawback is that it takes some time to take the photo. You know, it's gonna turn, take a photo, turn, take a photo. So that's the downside to it. And if you want something more convenient, then you'll be interested in the next category of 360 cameras that we're going to talk about, which are consumer one-shot 360 cameras, like all-in-one 360 cameras. So there are several of them, of course. There are many, dozens right now. The three that I wanted to focus on are the Ricoh Theta, the Yi 360 VR, and the Xiaomi Mi Sphere. Now, the reason I wanted to highlight these three cameras is because these three have very good exposure controls, and they have very good image quality. First, let's talk about the Theta. This is the Theta S and this is the Theta V. They look very similar, except that the Theta V is gunmetal gray. This is like matte black finish. And the Theta's advantage, there are two advantages for real estate. First, it has really good stitching, arguably the best in the business. And secondly, they have extensive exposure controls. So not only do they have auto, they have manual, they have ISO priority, shutter priority. They also have special features like exposure bracketing, and they have this thing called interval composite, where you can take kind of like a time lapse, but instead of like creating a time lapse video, the software will combine the exposures together. So this could be useful for, you know, like really low light conditions, for example. So those are some of the strengths of the Theta. Another strength of the Theta is that you can have really long exposures from up to 60 seconds. Because of the extensive exposure controls, the Theta V and the Theta S are really great options. Between the two, I kind of like the Theta S a little bit better because it has less chromatic aberration, and the stitching to me is a little bit better. But they're both, the S, SC, and the V are all good contenders. The next 360 camera I want to talk about is the Yi 360 VR. This is as of this time, it's still very new, and it's not yet out in the market. But what's great about the Yi 360 VR is the excellent optics, flawless, like super sharp everywhere, and almost zero chromatic aberration, and the flare is the most well controlled that I've seen. The optics is just superb. Now the resolution is about the same as the Theta, which is around 15 megapixels, and the stitching is pretty good. You know, we're using optical flow. Now, if you use the in-camera stitching, I'm not crazy about it. Let's put it that way. So the Yi 360 VR is also has exposure controls. But you just cannot select a shutter speed less than 1 second. So it's only for slow shutter speeds. Now the Yi 360 VR also has one special function for real estate, which we'll talk about in part 4 of this video, where we talk about techniques. Now the third all-in-one 360 camera that I want to talk about is one of my favorite 360 cameras, the Xiaomi Mi Sphere. So what I like about the Xiaomi Mijia Mi Sphere is besides the great video quality, its photo quality is really excellent. It's not perfect, but it's the one that I like the best among consumer 360 cameras up to, let's say, you know, about $800 or so. And it's very sharp, consistent sharpness almost through the very edge of the stitch line. The dynamic range is fantastic. Also has great exposure controls, full exposure controls like manual, and you can control the shutter speed with up to, I think, 1/6400, up to 32 seconds, and the base ISO is 100. Now the downside, it does have a little bit of chromatic aberration, and the stitching is not perfect. But if you're a perfectionist and you want to fix these issues, you can use third-party software. You'll be able to resolve them. And people who are very well experienced in 360 photos for real estate have already been using the Mijia Sphere with great results. But now we've talked about these all-in-one 360 cameras, but what if you wanted higher quality? Now the next option you could consider would be a panoramic head with a GoPro. So there are two that I have in mind. One is the Pano5+1 Mark II, and the other one is the Panohero H5B. So why would you want to shoot with these two? There are two important reasons. First, the resolution and image quality. It's 65 megapixels, and you get great dynamic range. It's just amazing image quality. The one-shot 360 camera like Theta or even Xiaomi will not be able to hold a candle to that. Now the other important reason is because they have zero parallax stitching error. So even in super tight spaces, you can use these to take really clean, perfectly stitched photos. The challenge with using them is there are two. One is that you must be absolutely careful when you're shooting with them so that the tripod doesn't move, because if the tripod moves, you'll have like a difficult time stitching them. The other challenge with using these is that you have to stitch the photos manually. So you'll have to download them into your software and stitch them. And in terms of stitching software, we can talk about that in part 3 of this video. So what's the difference between the Pano5+1 Mark II and the Panohero H5B? We'll talk about that. The Pano5+1 Mark II has two Pano heads, and it's compatible with GoPro Heroes 3, 4, 5, and 6. And you know, it's very easy to use. You just take 5 shots horizontally, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. There are detents here in this plate, and then you take one facing up, and then another, and 2 more facing down with this other Pano head, 1 and 2. And with those 8 shots, you'll be able to stitch a fully spherical 360 photos, 65 megapixels. Now the Panohero H5B has a different design. It just uses one Pano head, and you don't have to switch heads in between. So you turn it, you take a photo, turn it, take a photo, turn it, number 3, 4, and then you rotate this. 5, 6, 7, and 8. And with those 8 shots, you'll also get 65 megapixels. Panohero H5B is compatible only with the Hero 5 Black or the Hero 6. So that's the downside. On the other hand, like I said, you don't have to switch heads. The other thing is also you could use it upside down. So let's say, you know, it could be up on the ceiling, and you could still take the 360 photo. That's something you cannot do with the Pano5+1. But they're both great choices, and both of them will require some stitching, and we'll talk about that in part 3 of this video. Now, what if you wanted to go even better quality than the Pano5+1 or Panohero? For that, I used the Panono. One of my all-time favorite 360 cameras. So the Panono is a German-made, German-designed 360 camera with 36 lenses, and this has a resolution of 16384 by 8192, so that's 16K, and the 135 megapixels. So it's not just the resolution, the dynamic range is amazing. It's just fantastic. And Moreover, it has an HDR mode, and the HDR mode on this is excellent because it looks very natural. The exposure looks so natural in the HDR mode. The Panono looks really complicated, but it's actually very easy to use. You can connect with it with your smartphone, either iOS or Android, and trigger it remotely that way. There's also a selfie stick. I didn't bring it out here right now, but you know, it's got like, you know, about a 3-foot long selfie stick with a built-in trigger inside that you can trigger. And there's also a shutter here. I hardly use this because your hand will show up in the shot, but you could use that. And then the fourth way to shoot with the Panono, if you don't have a tripod with you, is to toss it into the air. So that beep tells you that it took a photo. Now the Panono doesn't. You have to stitch it using their cloud service. They don't give you the stitching software. You have to upload the photos to the cloud, and they'll stitch it for you. Now it doesn't cost anything extra right now, although they're talking about possibly charging a fee for people who upload large volumes of photos. Now, there's been some controversy about the Panono because they filed for bankruptcy a few months ago, I think back in April or May, I don't remember. But there are two kinds of bankruptcy. One is where the company's just out of business and they liquidate everything. Now that's not what happened here. They instead did the other kind of bankruptcy, which is for reorganization, where they basically tried to get their act together again, and they found a new investor. This investor is more experienced in running companies, and they've taken over the company, and they you can check out the links for an exclusive interview I had with them. And they're very excited, and they've got big plans, and we're very confident about Panono's future. And the main thing is that they are going to continue the cloud stitching service for the foreseeable future, and you don't have to worry about it. Having said that, you could also stitch the photos from the Panono using third-party software. I have a tutorial for that. Check it out in the description below. I use Panorama Studio Pro 3. Does the Panono have any downsides? Yes, there are a couple. One is the cost. You know, it's like $2,000 or $2,200 for the Panono. The other is the stitching distance. So the Panono must be at least like 4 feet away from everything, including yourself. If that like 4 feet is like really cutting it close. It's better to be like 5 feet or more. And if you're less than at a closer distance than that, it's not going to stitch correctly. So I wouldn't use the Panono for tight spaces, like car interiors, for example, or let's say small bathrooms. If you're taking a photo of that, I mean, so that's one reason why you cannot rely on solely on the Panono. It would be great to complement it with some of the other options that we've talked about. Speaking of options, now what if you wanted a very high quality, high resolution image with zero parallax error? And you can do that, and that's with a DSLR and a panoramic head, such as the Nodal Ninja. And traditionally, this is how 360 photos, fully spherical 360 photos have been done. You simply get a DSLR and repair it with a panoramic head and shoot from the nodal point. Depending on how wide the lens is, you would have to take several shots. If you're taking it with a fisheye lens that's fully circular, then maybe you could do it with maybe 3 or 4 shots. Now if you're gonna use a longer lens for higher resolution photos, then you will need maybe 30 or 40 shots. It could be any anything. It just depends on how detailed do you want it to be. The downside of the panoramic head for DSLR is, of course, the cost. Not only do you need the DSLR, you need the or an interchangeable lens camera, but you also need the lens. You also need a panoramic head, and the pano heads are not cheap, and it's kind of technical. And then you also have to stitch. So all these things add up to, like basically you spend more time and effort to take a photo in return for getting higher quality and zero error, zero parallax stitching, smooth stitching if you do it correctly. One kind of intermediate option is there's this thing called Tomshot 360, and that's kind of like a Panohero or Pano5+1, but specifically for DSLRs and mirrorless interchangeable lens cameras. So they make it basically simplify the process for you, so you don't have to like look for the nodal point and all that. So that's another option. Now let's move on to the next category of 360 cameras for real estate, which are these. Let's talk first about this one, which you might recognize as the Insta360 Pro. So why would you want to shoot with the Insta360 Pro for real estate? It takes 8K 360 photos, so it's not terribly high. It's about 30 megapixels for 2D. But the key is that it also shoots in 3D. So if you want to be one of the first real estate photographers to shoot in 3D for their clients, this is an excellent camera to use. I love the 3D effect, and the image quality is great. The downside of the Insta360 Pro for me is that the stitching at the zenith and the nadir isn't all that great yet. I mean, they're working on it, they're constantly improving on it, but right now it's not exactly great. We'll see. I've seen some prototypes or early versions of their new stitching software that look very promising, so that issue might eventually go away. But just want to let you know that issue. Now here's another 360 camera. This one is called Kandao Obsidian R. Kandao makes two kinds of obsidians, actually three, but they have the Obsidian R. This is this one for high resolution. There's also the Obsidian S for high speed, and they have a smaller one, or kind of their entry level one, which is the Obsidian Go. Now the Obsidian R also takes 8K 3D photos, just like the Insta360 Pro. It's more expensive. It's $7,000, whereas the Insta360 Pro is $3,500. The advantage of the Kandao Obsidian is that it has supposedly more sophisticated stitching software that's depth aware, and I've seen really good stitches from the zenith and nadir, and it looks really impressive. Now it does cost significantly more than the Insta360 Pro, which is why I wanted to talk about their other camera, which is the Kandao Obsidian Go. It's their entry-level camera. It costs $2,500, but it also takes 8K 3D photos. Now the downside is its video is limited to 4K 3D, whereas this is 8K 3D, and that's 6K 3D for video. But if for real estate, it's all three. Insta360 Pro, Obsidian R, and Obsidian Go take 3D 360 photos at 8K. So if your purpose is real estate photography, the Obsidian Go would be a really great alternative. It uses the same sophisticated software as the Obsidian. If you want to see how these 360 cameras compare to each other, check out the link in the description below, where I have samples from these 360 cameras, so you can compare them side by side to see how the differences between each of them. You'll also find information about each 360 camera, including a link to a more detailed review. Next, let's talk about some software for real estate. There are three that I'd like to talk about. One is Panorama Studio Pro 3, and it's my preferred stitching software. I compared it to Hugin, which is free, and to PT GUI, and for me, I found Panorama Studio 3 Pro to be the easiest to use and to have the best results. You can try out their trial versions of these software, and so you could check them out and compare for yourself. Now, another software is a cloud-based software called keepionball.com. And it's actually a virtual tour platform, but they can also stitch photos from DSLRs, but also from the Panohero and soon the Pano5+1. So if you have the Pano5+1 or Panohero and you don't want to spend additional money for the Panorama Studio 3 Pro, you can use Keep Eye on Ball instead. I've seen the results really good. Check out the links in the description below. The third software that I want to talk about is something I've mentioned before, which is the Cupix software. It's great, Cupix.com. It's like virtual tour software, but it's 3D, so it's more like Matterport. You know, if you're familiar with Matterport, you can not only look around, but you can also move around the space to give you a better idea of the better feeling for the space, give the clients a better feeling for the space, and this additional sense of presence. There's an argument that it helps close the sale fast. So these are some of the software that you might want to check out for real estate. I mean, there are plenty out there, but these three I wanted to highlight. Now let's talk about techniques, and today I wanted to focus on how to make yourself disappear from a 360 photo even if there's nowhere to hide. The trick is really simple. The concept is that you simply take two photos from the exact same spot with your 360 camera, and then you combine the two photos and you just mask yourself out from one and the other, and with those two you'll disappear from the photos. Really, it sounds like, you know, dead simple, but it's effective. It works. There are some software that facilitate that. One is the Vanish 360. It's for the Ricoh Theta, and basically it automates the process for you. There's a self timer there, and it takes I think 3 photos, and it will erase you from the photo. Now, the other software that's really cool for that is the Yi 360 VR's app, which has a built-in erasing function as well. Basically, you use a self-timer, takes 3 shots, and it will remove you from the photo automatically. One more camera that I wanted to mention for when we talk about this technique is the Insta360 Pro. Why? Because the Insta360 Pro has this special function for batch stitching, where you can stitch a bunch of photos together, and you can specify that they'll all be stitched identically. So that's perfect when you want to do a composite like this, and you know, especially because it has so many lenses. Normally there would be many chances for the stitching to be not perfectly the same for let's say different photos that you took, but with this option they can all be stitched identically, which makes it very easy to mask yourself out. Also great for time lapses. So thanks again for watching. I know this was a really long video. I really appreciate your attention, and for more information on 360 cameras and accessories, go to 360rumors.com, the best kept secret for 360 cameras. And please subscribe to us on Facebook and on YouTube and Twitter and Instagram. Thanks again. I'll see you next time.